The NFL's legal tampering period for free agency begins in less than 24 hours. The Jets act fast, get one of their own guys under contract before he hits the market. We are here to talk about that, what it means for other players on the roster, and who some of the targets might be tomorrow. I'm Glenn Naughton with Jet Nation Radio and JetNation.com. Be sure to log into JetNation.com where you can register and become a part of what is the most active Jets message board on the web, where it is bound to be hopping in the coming days and weeks, as it always is this time of year. I am joined, as always, by my co-host Dylan Terraman. Dylan, how we doing?
I'm doing well. Tons of news already coming out. Free agency, technically, the legal tampering period hasn't even started yet, and we're getting a lot of news. It's funny. You see even like the Jared Stidham deals of the world going out there, and it's like, well, Stidham had a market. Well, how would he have a market if the tampering period hasn't started yet? But we know how that really works. So it officially becomes able for players to talk to teams tomorrow at like noon. So a lot of moving pieces, and we're already off to a hot start. Even non-Jets news has been blasted so far.
Yeah. The DK. I've been listen. I said months ago to you and Chris that if I got a PS5 and NCAA football for PS5, it would significantly cut into the time that I have to do other football things. My prophecy was correct. I got a PS5. I'm friggin' hooked on NCAA. And I'm like, oh, one more game. And then I'm
Yep.
like, damn it, it's been 3 hours and I haven't watched Prospects yet. So today I've just played a couple hours, logged on, and there's the Schefter tweet or one of the insiders. I forget which insider. Here's all the sign. DK Metcalf. I didn't even know he got traded. I saw that he wanted out.
Yes.
I didn't know that deal happened. I see the Sherwood deal. When did the Sherwood deal break? I saw it 3 minutes ago.
It broke the same like 2 minute span that the Devontae deal broke. So everybody was reacting to the Devontae news, and Jordan
But
Schultz
how
just
long ago was that? How long? Was like
at
an
least
hour,
like
6 hours?
3 hours, 2 hours ago
See,
now. Yeah. So
I
it
don't normally
happened.
miss news because I'm
Yeah.
normally on Twitter constantly, but now I'm like, oh, I got to recruit.
Yeah, Devontae news happened like probably 2 hours ago, and it happened within the same like minute because not many people were reporting on it, and then all of a sudden it was getting tweeted out more and more, and then it was gaining steam. But yeah, I saw it as soon as it happened, but it had to have been 2 hours at this point. But it was definitely swept under the rug with the Devontae news.
Yeah, and props to Zach Rosenblatt. He was the first one to report that there was mutual interest on both sides with Sherwood and the Jets. I think a lot of folks, me include, and look, I like Sherwood. I said to you before we started, I wanted him to come back,
Mm-hmm.
but I wasn't so sure we would see Aaron Glenn go with two undersized linebackers with him and Quincy Williams. But what might this mean? Now, think back, folks. Think back to the final game of the season. Jets beat the Dolphins, and within 20 minutes of that win, Quincy Williams fires off a tweet about give me more money. So we know he wants a pay raise. And now you just pay Jamie and Sherwood 3 years, 45 million. Not sure we said the terms. 3 years, 45 million. That's 15 mil a year for Sherwood. Are you? I'm guessing, given he's an all pro, Quincy's looking at that thinking, well, I'm going to need like 20, 22. Are the Jets really going to spend 37 million with the CJ Mosley cap hit? Are the Jets going to commit 40 plus $1 million to the linebacker position this year? Maybe they're looking at Quincy as a trade chip, or look, maybe they are. I don't know. Maybe they're happy to spend 40 million at linebacker. Most teams don't do that. But if the Jets, I mean, that those are the two choices. They're either spending 40 million at linebacker or they're moving Quincy Williams. What are you thinking there, Dylan?
It's tough because we just got out of the whole CJ Mosley thing that we were talking about offline, and how they were paying a boatload of money to one player at the position, and maybe you could justify splitting it up over two good players that have performed well for you in the past. I'm just looking at the Quincy numbers, and even if you try to trade him pre or post June 1, I mean, maybe post June 1, you could trade him, and the cap savings goes to 6.5 instead of around 1.6. But how advantageous is it for you to trade your off-ball linebacker in June? You know what I mean? So I don't know. This is going to be a tough one for me. I would assume he asks for a new deal at a minimum, or a restructured deal. It's the last year of his deal. His cap number for 2025 is 8.4. So if you could restructure some of that, get the number to come down, but you're paying him a little bit more, even if it is just a 1 or 2 year kind of deal, because he does have a void year in 26. I'm not sure if you could make that a regular contract year and just have him play it out for the last 2 of his deal, because I would assume, based on the Jamie and Sherwood contract with 30 million guaranteed, a lot of that is in year 1 and 2. So realistically, you could probably get out of the Sherwood deal in 2 years. We'll see the full contract details probably in the next coming hours or days, but I think that they're going to try to play this smart where they don't have a huge hole at linebacker. So my guess right now is they lean to keep them both and probably just give Quincy a little bit more money on a 1 or 2 year deal. And then maybe in 2 years, they assess these needs again at the position.
Yeah, that's the other part of it, right? Like, we know from the tweet that he wants more money, but is he also looking for more years? Like, before, when he signed his previous deal, he wasn't quite as established. He wasn't in position to say, I'm good enough that I deserve a 4 or 5 year deal. Well, now he can. So, he kind of took what he had to last time. This time he's got a little bit more leverage as a better player, being, as a much improved player. Speaking of Zach Rosenblatt, he's got a little nugget here saying that right now, sticking with free agency, and this will be one of the first things we were going to cover anyway, Dylan. As of right now, he thinks Justin Fields to the Jets is about a 50-50 proposition. There was some optimism earlier in the day, but if the Steelers really believe he's a starter, Rosenblatt figures, and this makes sense, that going out and getting DK Metcalf helps them retain Fields. He says if Fields makes it to tomorrow without being re-signed, the Jets' chances go up. Well, I know what he means, but that's fairly obvious. If he doesn't sign, there's a chance the Jets will sign him. Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah. Far more likely than if he signed to the Steelers. I would
that's
say
how
the
that would
Jets don't
work.
have a very good chance at that point.
Yeah,
But I think what he's saying is if he makes it to, which he does say, if he makes it to tomorrow, if they don't get him done today, there's a shot the Jets get him 50-50. And that's where we can kick it off. Free agency about to start. The Jets, don't know if you've heard, folks, breaking news, don't have a quarterback, have not for most of the last 50 years, back in familiar territory. So, free agency, we've talked about it, Dylan. Justin Fields, not a great player, has done a couple of good things, but all things considered, probably the best option out there for the Jets because he is young. There is upside, there is room for improvement. But the more I think about it, even before the Rosenblatt tweet, I was thinking about it earlier today. I'm like, I think Pittsburgh last second gets him done. I mean, Russ, I mean, I don't see it happening. And do the Jets end up with Russ? What do you think of that?
I would much prefer Fields over Russ. I don't think Russ is the type of quarterback we need right now. And that's not to say he couldn't be better than Justin Fields, but I think Muji saw the up close and personal version of Russell Wilson when it wasn't working at all in Denver. And there was a lot of rumors that, he had his own office in the facility and he was certainly not treated like one of 53, more like 1 and 52, which we've been told ad nauseum from our current coach. That's not the way we're going to do things. So I don't think the Russ thing is like, I would hope that it doesn't have legs, honestly.
I don't know. Sorry to cut you off.
No,
I just
fine.
threw it out there because the talk is Fields. If Fields go like what are your options?
Right.
And I mean that's what we're about to get into, right?
Yeah.
Like
Connor Hughes just tweeted actually to talk to your Fields point, and you said Rosenblatt tweeted earlier about it. The Jets' interest in Fields is well known. It's up to Fields to decide if he wants the Jets. This is literally 2 minutes ago. A return to Pittsburgh to play with Metcalf and Pickens, and I'd expect the Jets to turn their attention to Marcus Mariota or Carson Wentz. So those being the two options, like
man,
if he does return, like
Glory Days. What's that Bruce Springsteen song? Glory Days. Let's get that blaring.
It can't be the pivot
sign them both. Carson Wentz, Marcus Mariota. Have a QB rotation every series, a different guy. Carson Wentz, they're both former first-round picks. Dylan, that doesn't fire you up?
They were 1 and 2
buy 4 sets of season tickets?
They were 1 and 2 in the same draft. It's just incredible how we've gotten here. And
that was Winston. That was Winston.
Oh, is it Goff and Wentz? Goff and Wentz and Winston and Mariota. So they were both what? Second overall pick?
Either way, elite talents. Elite talents.
Sure.
Carson Wentz has a Super Bowl ring, doesn't he?
Yes. Yeah, I think he has 2 even. Wasn't he a backup for the Chiefs last year too when they
Look at
won? So,
he's a
I mean, he was a backup
two-time
every
Super
time his
Bowl
team won the Super
first
Bowl.
round pick. That's
Yeah,
what they're going to print on the flyer, the brochure.
yeah.
Get your Jets season tickets now.
It's definitely
Carson Wentz.
uninspiring. I hope those aren't the pivot points, but like you say, like what are the pivot points? The free agent market is trash. Kirk Cousins is not the one I want. I've already said Derek Carr, please just stay in New Orleans, and it looks like he is.
Oh, he is. Yeah, he got his money.
He's not taking a pay cut. They kind of just did some moving around, and now his cap hit is like 62 million. So like,
Turned it into signing bonus
yeah,
or
good
whatever.
for them. Like a $62 million cap hit when you're already trashed in the cap space, and the cap even it goes up, but for the Saints it doesn't go up.
No,
It
no.
doesn't seem to go up. So it is what it is. There, the options are very slim, and like it's almost to the point, and I hate being like this, like a one hole type of person, like Justin Fields or bust. But like, if not, just go draft a quarterback and start that guy because you're not really Tyrod Taylor and the quarterback that you're drafting are going to be competing with whoever you sign in free agency that's not Justin Fields with the upside. Like Kirk Cousins, even like, what are you going to do with Kirk Cousins? Maybe get
No.
like I just don't see it. I don't see what the
How
path
about
is.
this? How about this, Dylan? One of the reasons we've agreed that Fields is the way to go is because he's young enough that there's time to improve and get better.
Yes.
Maybe in a better system. And Aaron Glenn wants a quarterback who can run. He wants a mobile quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel Jones?
I've heard people say it.
I mean, Daniel Jones, Carson Wentz, or Marcus Mariota. I'm taking Daniel Jones every time.
Yeah, if those are my 3 options, I would probably lean heavily towards Daniel Jones. Oh God, it just sounds so bad saying that live on airwaves.
Great's it going to be when Daniel Jones and Aaron Rodgers are starting quarterbacks for the Jets and Giants next year? How funny is that going to be?
And they just flip teams. Yeah. Oh God, who would cut who first? Would we cut Daniel Jones in the middle of the season like New York did, or would they just get so sick of Rodgers that they cut him? I don't know. That'd be a tough one. Oh man, this is uninspiring. But this is the problem when you don't have a quarterback in an uninspiring quarterback year. And I know everybody wants to say 2026 is going to be that much better. We don't know that. Like we've talked about that before. We don't know that. So like this is why having a quarterback in this league is paramount because you can't do anything without it. Like we're going to spend probably half the show just like talking about quarterback and like there's so many other positions that almost don't matter if you don't have the quarterback, because what does it matter if you sign a really high expensive safety, a good CB2, and then you go and you don't sign a right tackle, you don't get a good quarterback, and you have 5 wins, So it's like, how much can you really be active in free agency when you don't have a quarterback to build around?
I got people getting mad at me. Glenn, why are you so negative?
Imagine.
We're about to have Marcus Mariota and Carson Wentz as the 2. Glenn, why are you so down on the team? You're never this negative. Because I see what's happening. They don't have a damn quarterback. And the fact that Carson Wentz, I don't care if it's as a joke. The fact that Marcus Mariota and Carson Wentz, just the fact that suggesting that isn't preposterous is preposterous.
Yeah.
That this could be a reality.
Yep.
How many Jets fans are going to watch Carson Wentz play quarterback for this team on opening day next year? Anyway. Here's the thing. Here's all that aside. Here's why all that may not matter, Dylan. Aaron Glenn, Darren Muji have said to the fans, our plans to we plan to win now. We're going to start winning now. They say that. I'm thinking, well, it's lip service, kind of a dumb thing to say because it's sort of unnecessary added pressure. You could just say, look, we're going to build the roster, see what we have, starting, and you get that like year 1.5 sort of that free pass, like, oh, it's not really your team and you just took over and you don't have a quarterback, so you might get a little, but fine, you want to put the pressure on yourself, go right ahead.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it's lip service because I don't know if you saw the Quincy Williams comment from the other day. He was over this side of the world, not in England, but he was in Dublin with Isaiah Davis. They were opening a Jets girls flag football league or something like that. And Quincy Williams was asked about Aaron Glenn. He said, I talked to Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn said, I'm here to win now. We're ready to win now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, all right, well, if this is the line you're selling your players on, like, here's why they should be fired up, then I'm taking you at your word that you expect to win now. Guess what? I don't think you believe you're winning now with Tyrod Taylor or Marcus Mariota or Carson Wentz. So what's that tell me? You either take a QB at 7 or you make a splash and deal for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
You can't say win now, and then go to battle with Carson Wentz because the season before your first ever game, you have no credibility. It's like
Right.
this and again, I love the Glenn hire, but if they open the season with Carson Wentz or Marcus Mariota, even on the roster, it's like, all right, well, this is kind of a joke. This is a clown show. I mean, you can live with it if they trade for a quarterback, but I don't know if you listened to it, Dylan. Rich Cimini's latest podcast.
No, I haven't.
And look, of course, he's got a bias. His son coaches on the team, but he had Charlie Weiss in for a 20-minute conversation about Jackson Dart. And Weiss was like, I know this guy better than any other quarterback because, of course, my son coaches him. I've talked to him. I've been to practice. I've watched him improve. He gets better every year. He's easily a first-round pick. I'm like, maybe he's a reach, but do you just say we don't have a quarterback and we need one, so we're going to reach? We're going to take Jackson Dart with the 7th pick.
Yeah, I hope they don't. Again, I hope they don't. But again, I'm not coming up with better options. So you'd have to, I guess, trust the process. And that's where more blind faith than anything would come in if they decided to do that. I think regardless of who the name is, it has to make you at least debate, is this better than Tyrod Taylor? Because if it's a name that you immediately say, well, clearly that's not better than Tyrod, so we know Tyrod's going to be the starter for at least the beginning portion of the season. I don't think that is the way to go at all. You need somebody who's going to compete and make you say, Justin Fields, okay. Some don't think he's better than Tyrod Taylor. I think he has more upside than Tyrod Taylor. So you can argue that he could start
and
over
more durability.
Right. So you can argue that he could start over him. If you were to go get, Easton Stick, I'll use Buffalo Jet fans guy. Like if you go get Easton Stick, like that's you're clearly showing signs that you don't care enough about the position to be competitive in year one. That now you could change your attitude and draft a guy at 7 or trade up to 1 and draft Cam Ward and say, hey, we're just going to throw him into the fire because we believe he's the guy. That's all well and good. But I feel like in free agency, you have to bring in a name that is like, hey, we're going to let this guy compete, because as of right now, 7 is not a spot where you can draft a guy and say, hey, this is our plug and play day one starter. Let's feel good about it. And some might not even feel good about Cam Ward. And I know you and I have been on the Cam Ward, hype train for what feels like 3.5 years now, like really. And, there's some people that are now saying Jackson Dart's QB2 over Shadur Sanders. So it's kind of just a crapshoot, of course, but Cam Ward might be the only name in the draft that would make me feel comfortable as like, okay, he's probably going to start over Tyrod Taylor by the middle of camp, and we're going to feel good about it day one, even if it doesn't look great. Any other name to me is just like really like starting to go down a 4-win, 5-win season. And I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves because we have 6 months to dwell on that if that's the case. But it's not looking like there's many bright opportunities for a good quarterback to enter the fold.
Well, that's the key part of this is trade or draft is the only option. Sam Darnold ain't coming back.
No, I don't.
I don't even know if they'd want him back. But Sam Darnold, outside of Sam Darnold, what free agent quarterback do you look at that inspires you and makes you go, okay, this guy's going to beat out Tyrod Taylor, and they maybe not even just maybe they make a playoff push.
Yeah,
I don't see one name.
Season, even a
I don't see one
7-win
name.
season is hard. Yeah.
I don't see one name on that list that makes me go, oh, that guy. Now, again, Daniel Jones, I think they made the playoffs a few years ago with him, didn't they?
Yeah, Dayball's
I'm sure he had one playoff season.
And then he got the big contract after the first year of Dayball.
Yeah. So this is what I mean. I was having this conversation with a friend of mine down in London the other day, and we were saying, like, there's got to be a move for a quarterback. Because that was when I read the Quincy Williams quote. I'm like, if Aaron Glenn is telling his players we're here to win now, then Tyrod Taylor's not your quarterback. And Jacoby Brissett and all these free agents, Wentz, none of those guys are doing anything for you. So if you genuinely believe that you're going to win now, and that's what makes me think trade, honestly.
Yeah.
What's Jackson Dart? Is he going to be ready day one? I mean, is he going to be ready this year?
Hard to say, yeah.
And I don't want to do this thing again where you draft a guy and throw him in the fire and he stinks and you cut him. Because he's overwhelmed and he's unprepared. and he's not ready for, live bullets yet.
Mm-hmm.
So if you draft him, fine, sit him and let Tyrod Taylor start until he gets hurt, which, you're probably looking at week 4 or 5. And then, if you have another vet, I don't know. And who knows what the hell would happen with Jordan Travis at this point.
Yeah. So Spot Rack has these guys listed by their previous AAV, so what they earned last year on an annual average value. So Sam Darnold is number 1 because he had a 1-year, 10-year deal with a $10 million deal with Minnesota. And then Zach Wilson's number 2 on this list. So there's nobody coming to save us. Drew Lock, Justin Fields, names Justin Fields we talked about. Lock we haven't. Winston, Mac Jones, Case Keenum. None of these like Mason Rudolph, Cooper Rush. I've actually heard people think that is a viable option to go get 31-year-old Cooper Rush because he's a game manager. I don't see it, man. Like that's just maybe you do pull the trade of all trades and you find somebody that, I know Kyler Murray was floated out there a couple weeks ago. Like the Jets should trade for him.
He was a name I brought up a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I think
whenever.
I think we talked about him. I'm not saying it's not a good idea for the Jets, but that'd be a terrible move for the Cardinals in a season where they're picking like 16th in the draft and they don't have.
Well, if they get pick 7 from the Jets.
Well, that's the case. Is you'd have to get pick 7, probably keep 16. Like there's not a swap. And still get way more on top of it for Kyler Murray. So and then you're still not guaranteed a quarterback. So it's very, very hard for somebody to want to give up their quarterback in this type of year. So the Jets might be in a situation where they're outbidding for Justin Fields. And if that's the case, and to Paul's point in the chat, he says just trade back. Like you might not be able to trade back if you don't have a quarterback. Yep. You're going to have to trade up. And he says trade up to number 1, they'll lose me forever. But trading back isn't as easy as the simulators make it seem. Somebody's got to come up for the pick for the player. And how many times can you feasibly trade back? Like you can't trade back 3 times in the first round. That just doesn't happen. So it's going to be hard to, justify doing much in the draft if you don't have a quarterback.
Yeah. And Dane, I don't know if you missed it earlier. With the winning now comment, that's what I said. Like when Aaron Glenn was saying that, I was like, okay, whatever, no big deal. Mm-hmm. But my point was, you now have his players saying, I've spoken to him, and he told me, we're here to like. This is what he's selling to his players, and they're not stupid. They know they don't have a quarterback. You know what I mean? You think the Jets players are walking around the locker room like, hey, Aaron, coach says we're going to win now. That's it. We're ready to win. They know they don't have a quarterback. But if that's what he's selling these guys, then that tells me you have a plan to get a quarterback, or you're telling one of the dumbest lies we've ever seen. Because everybody knows you're not winning with Tyrod Taylor.
And to Michael's question here, I wanted to transition because I've been asked this on every pod I've gone on the last 2 weeks. If Shedeur Sanders does fall, there's rumors that teams aren't going to be – they're going to try to go into the veteran market. I know the Titans, Jeremy Fowler even said a Zach Wilson type player at quarterback. And I don't think they're going to go quarterback at 1. So if Sanders is there, you don't have to trade any picks for Shedeur. What do you do at 7? Do you make the call and draft him, or do you say we'll let somebody we'll pass on him and take somebody at a different position, maybe an edge rusher or offensive tackle?
I mean, the 2 things with Shedeur off the top of my head. One, he doesn't run. And Aaron Glenn supposedly places a ton of emphasis on having a running quarterback. Now, listen, if it's a 1-year non-playoff thing, like where you're going to go with Wentz or Mariota or whoever, fine. Mm-hmm. But when you draft this guy, you're saying this is my guy for the next 10 years. So I'd be really surprised if they draft a guy who can't do one of the main things Aaron Glenn wants his quarterback to do, and he's the long-term plan. That would be surprising to me. The other piece of that is that, and look, and I talked about this, and one thing I didn't clear up, because I thought Aaron Glenn, the whole thing with, we don't want quarterbacks with, big personalities and all that, or who are celebrities. In today's NFL, if you're a good quarterback, you're a celebrity, like it or not. However, Shedeur, even as a guy who's not set foot in an NFL locker room, as a player anyway, he's already a celebrity. He to me, you can look at him and say, is he going to be the next guy who's like, 1 plus 52 because of the big personality, the big, the background, like you're seeing these reports out of the combine that he's cocky, but I kind of give him a pass on that. I'm guessing, I could be wrong, but my guess is when he's talking to teams like the Jets, who he doesn't want to play for, he probably is blowing them off and not being like the most professional guy. But I'll bet when you get him in a room where he thinks they can build something, he's probably a different dude. Like, get a team he wants to play for and talk to those execs, and then talk to the Jets execs, and you'll probably get two different stories.
Mm-hmm.
Cocky, nonchalant, blew us off, versus, yeah, he had his stuff together, did good on the whiteboard, whatever.
Yeah.
So I don't really fault Shador for blowing off teams he doesn't want to play for, because why, if that's like fine, it's you don't want to play for them, then do what you can to not play for them. But it would surprise me if the Jets took him because A, no mobility, and B, really big personality, celebrity type guy that you kind of get the impression, again, that was a big Parcells thing. I don't want celebrity quarterbacks. They just let Rodgers go, and that was one of the reasons they allowed to leak, was that the big persona and all that. So those are two pretty big things that are not, I don't want to say red flags, but go against what the Jets are supposedly looking for.
Yeah.
Tales of an NFL Jockey says in the chat about Russ Wilson. We talked about that a couple minutes ago. Don't want him.
Mm-hmm.
His name will be out there if Field signs, because there aren't many names out there. But I don't want any part of Russ Wilson. And again, I think, as we just said, the 1+52, he's not a team guy. They're not going to want to bring him in.
Yeah. As far as like the celebrity side of Shador, I completely agree. It wouldn't make sense to say we're moving on from Aaron Rodgers and we're going to draft Shador. But I do also understand it from the aspect of they're at completely different points in their career. And yeah, Shador was a really big fish in a small pond in college, but when he gets to the NFL, who knows? He could have a very humbling experience and, kind of embrace the role of little fish in a big pond. So there's things like that that could work out to the Jets' favor. I'm not saying I advocate for it, but I will push back on the mobility only because I feel like when I watch him, he's fast enough to get out of the pocket. It's just a matter of if he just wants to do it or not. You know what I mean? Like, he'll sit in the pocket for too long, and when
he does do that. But
when he decides to run, he's fine. He just doesn't break away from runners in the way that I thought he would, based on the hype around him before I got into his film.
So here's what I mean when I talk about the mobility. I get the you're not. I don't disagree with what you're saying,
Mm-hmm.
but to me, listening to the interview, I forget the reporter's name who talked about it with Scott. I got the impression, and it makes sense. Aaron Glenn wants a quarterback who runs well enough that it keeps coordinators up at night, like that you can use him as part of your game plan for your rushing attack. He doesn't want a guy who moves well enough to pick up 10 yards if there's enough wide open space. And that's what Shador is. Yes, Shador can run to open space, maybe make a guy miss, and pick up 10, 12 yards. He wants guys who are threats to score with the ball, Jalen Milroe types.
Yep.
And that's why I wonder if he'll be the next Jets quarterback. Jackson Dart isn't Milroe, but he's a lot more mobile than Prime. Brady Cook at a Mizzou, who I really like as a day 3 option, runs better than Shador, and actually ran pretty well at the combine. So that's what I mean. And again, Cook isn't a keep you up at night guy either, but he's closer to that than Shador is from what I've seen.
No.
So, yeah, I'm not saying Shador is Ken O'Brien back there and he can't move, but he's not a guy that defensive coordinators are going to be like, okay, what are we going to do about him when he takes off? Like, just catch him, tackle him. He's not going to do anything special.
Yeah, and I think if it is 100% true that we are only eyeing people who can run as almost as well as they pass, it feels like Justin Fields might be the only option in free agency. A few weeks ago. And then, like, to your Milroe point, maybe you do just like risk it and take him at 42, because I think, to me, justifying the quarterback pick at 7 when there could be a potential blue chip or what I would consider a red chip player, the next tier down of blue chip, because there's maybe 14 players with a first overall grade right now in most people's minds, like the Daniel Jeremiahs of the world, the Matt Millers of the world. They have like 14, 15 first-round grades on these guys. Maybe 5 or 6 of those guys are considered blue-chip players, and Shador might not even be considered a blue-chip player at this point. So at 7, if you have a guy you deem as a blue-chipper like a Mason Graham fall to you, how do you not justify taking that and then taking the swing at 42 on quarterback where it's a little bit less, I know it's a premium pick and all, but I don't know. 7 is too hard for me to swallow unless you get one of those top 2 guys, because then I feel like you can make it work. But if they're convicted on just Jackson Dart, and they think that he's got the upside, yeah, I do think his mobility is a plus. He showed toughness. I'm in the middle of his Arkansas game right now, and he's actually making some really good throws. It's just peaks and valleys with him, and if you can coach that stuff out of him, that's great. To the Sanders point, how quickly is it going to be until Tanner Engstrand is getting called out in the media by Dion? Like that's been the big thing, like talked about by Jets fans. It's like it's only a matter of time before somebody's job is lost because nobody's competent in the building or whatever. And I don't think Jackson Dart comes with that baggage where somebody's going to get their head chopped off if he doesn't make it work. Now at 7, almost anybody's up to getting fired if it doesn't work at 7, and that's what kind of scares me. So maybe I'm more risk adverse and just want a higher floor player at a different position at 7, but I feel like you can justify it if it's your guy, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think that was when I've been saying for a couple weeks now. I think I said it in the forums in Jet Nation. I can't recall weeks ago where I was like, it feels like it's going to be Milroe to me in the second round because, again, a dynamic runner,
Right.
absolutely. Throws a good deep ball, but just too inconsistent underneath. Too many turnovers, lots of fumbles, lots of interceptions. So it's kind of it's a scary proposition for me. If they do take him, I hope they take another quarterback, on day 3, who's got maybe a lower ceiling, but a guy who protects the football better. Again, a Brady Cook type, Curtis Rourke type. I don't think they wouldn't take Rourke. He doesn't run. Yeah, somebody along those lines.
Before we move off a quarterback, would you be cool with signing Fields? Let's just say 2 years, $25 million, so $12.5 million per year, and then they go out and draft Milroe with that upgraded third-round pick that I know we haven't talked about on air, but the Jets got a clerical error that helps the Jets in 2025. I swear I felt like I had to read the tweet 5 times to make sure that I was reading it properly before tweeting. Like we gained
Was it even a
20 picks.
clerical error, or was the media just wrong?
Well, that's the thing is like media wrong, clerical error. Like
I'm sure the Jets knew what pick they had.
The Jets knew damn well, and they weren't going to say anything. Of
They
course,
don't care. Yeah, they don't care if we're running around with the wrong info.
So us finding out is like a gold mine for us. And like now I feel like maybe you could take a Jalen Milroe at pick 73 and not have to go, 92 is a big gap between 42. So like that was the big problem for me is like, at what point do you have to either trade up for your quarterback or just take a reach swing where you are? Because 42, you can justify it, but if you could have grabbed him at 92, of course everybody would do that. So 73 might be that middle point, but if they sign Fields for 12.5, draft Milroe at 73, are you okay with that, knowing that they've kind of rounded out the room and have a plan as far as dual threats?
I mean, they'll have stopped. It's funny you say. I think I made this joke the other day. Again on the forums, I said at least if you get Milroe and Fields, you're consistent. You're getting 2 dynamic runners who can't throw the football. Like, but at least it looks like you have a plan.
Sure.
Like, oh look, the Jets know what they want.
Mm-hmm.
They want a runner who doesn't really throw it that well.
Mm-hmm.
Half joking. Like again, it's not like they can't throw the football, obviously, but they just can't do it well enough consistently. Listen, if Fields could do it consistently, he'd be looking at a $40 million a year contract. But he can't, so he's not. But he's probably still a better option than Mariota or Wentz. Cousins, Tales on an Asphalt Jockey says visions of Cousins under center. That's not happening. Forget about he can't run or throw at this point in his life.
No, the injured shoulder doesn't help, and he ended the season 1 touchdown, 9 interceptions over the last 5 games. And sure, your shoulder heals in your second year removed off the ACL, but the same people telling me that Rodgers will never be good off the ACL are the ones telling me that Kirk Cousins will be good off the ACL. Yeah. So the quarterback discourse is hard at this point in
time. Michael says I'd take Warren if it was up to me. He makes up for the Bowers miss. I don't think it does. You're getting an inferior player for a higher pick.
Yeah,
at a position of where there's no positional value, and you don't take tight ends that high.
Yeah,
that wasn't a shot at you, Michael, by the way.
Yeah, I don't know. You don't have to make up for the Bowers miss. I mean, I'm not gonna defend Joe Douglas anymore because there's no point. But like, if you draft for the year ahead, and if you saw the tight end market was much better this year as a total, and it wasn't worth taking one. I hope they don't take. I know I mocked Warren up to us at 7, trying to just be realistic, but I would hope they'd go in a different direction, like defensive line. Even offensive line to me is kind of taken over the power rankings before Warren or even Tetairoa McMillan. So I don't know if it's about making up for the miss, because I think we still all love Olu, and there's no left tackles out there in the world unless you want to re-sign Tyron Smith. It's barren out on the left tackle market too. So I think it was more of a let's play that one season ahead, and they missed out on a potentially historic tight end, of course. But
Yeah, Gary says we want the first 3 to be starters, but don't we all? I want 10
that's
picks
the
and 10
dream.
starters, but
That's
we'll
the
see what
dream.
happens. But I see what you mean. You want guys who are going to play and
Yeah.
not use those premium picks on backups, which is a point. Yeah, that's a point I made a little
At
bit
7 and
last year.
42, at 7 and 42, you're probably drafting guys who are going to start this year. Maybe it's not week 1, but they're probably going to start the back end, if not the back majority of the season. Pick 3, you're probably looking at a guy who's going to be a productive player in year 1 or 2. Same with your round 4 pick, as a year 1 or 2 type of player. You can't. Yeah, if you get an instant success, that's fantastic. Like Puka Nakua in the 5th round, that's fantastic if he hits the ground running. But 3rd, 4th, 5th pick is probably the year 2. Let's catch his stride after full off season in the NFL, and he's bulked up to a good size and those types of things. So I agree with what you're saying. Overall, 3 picks need to be starters at some point, but I don't know if it's like immediate day 1, we're filling a hole type starters, because the class doesn't necessarily warrant that. And neither does the roster, in my opinion.
All right. Well, we've spent 36 and a half minutes on quarterbacks.
Told you we
So
would.
we have 24 minutes to do every other position on the roster. Listen, I'm willing to skip running back.
Yeah, we don't.
I don't see them adding anyone of any significance there.
Unless they trade Brees, we can circle back, but that's not. Nothing's happening here until day 3 of the draft, in my opinion.
Right. So the couple names I wrote down at quarterback were Justin Fields, who we talked about. Question maybe Teddy Bridgewater. He was in that building in Detroit. He's back in the league. Again, he's not a runner, but I think they would take a non-runner if it's for a year or 2 gap to work with a guy like Milroe or Dart or someone like that.
Mm-hmm.
Daniel Jones, who we mentioned. And again, speaking of veteran mentor type quarterbacks, I would have no problem if you brought Josh Johnson back as a backup.
Yeah, and then his 2nd year, he has to transition to quarterback coach, though.
Yeah, and I would love that.
100%. Here's one that was just tweeted out, and let me find the exact person who tweeted it. Carlton Davis. Oh, Adam Silver. Or is it Mike Silver? Mike Silver tweeted that the Jets and the Patriots are going to be heavily interested in former Lions cornerback Carlton Davis. I'm not into bidding wars for guys who are, 28 years old, but he is a scheme fit clearly for what they do, what they did rather in Detroit, man-to-man coverage, where it allows you to blitz heavier. Him and Sauce on the outside with Michael Carter on the slot, I feel like could be good. But your thoughts on Carlton Davis and a potential bidding war between us and the Patriots?
He's a name that I have down on my spreadsheet for potential corner targets. It's an easy prediction because he's played for Aaron Glenn, but I think he's going to cost a little money. I don't know how much of a bidding war the Jets will be able to get into over anyone. They've got $52 million in cap. That's not a lot of money.
No,
and
the Patriots
they
have
had
the
52
most.
and they signed Sherwood.
Yeah.
So whatever Sherwood cost year 1, even if it's small, then you figure they've got $47 million in cap. Are you really in position to get in a bidding war over a corner and pay 17, 18 million? I don't think they are. So I would chalk that up under.
And what the Athletic says, Carlton Davis, quote, on his approach to free agency, quote, "This time I ain't going to settle for less," end quote. So he's going to want top dollar. It's a matter of if the Jets want to pay him top dollar, because we know in one more season they have to pay their current in-house corner top dollar, and that's not necessarily a strategy I would advise them taking.
Yep. So we're going to skip running back. Let's jump to receiver. Dylan, I'll give you the names I have.
Okay.
And some thoughts on why you can, if you have the same names, throw them out there or to share some thoughts. But a guy, listen, if they could go out and get one big money guy, to me, I would go out and, well, again, if he's got a clean bill of health, I'd pay for Chris Godwin.
Yeah.
They need another receiver. He's a stud. He's been a stud since college. He's still a stud in the NFL, but he had a horrific injury. If he's not medically cleared, obviously that's a no. Then the cheaper guys, Tim Patrick, De'Ami Brown, Darius Slayton, who probably wouldn't be cheap, but he'd be cheaper than Godwin. Here's a name. Again, you don't want a bunch of veterans, but if you're going to bring in one or two young guys, and if you can get him cheap enough, I wouldn't really object to Keenan Allen.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't mind any position group, like one older vet in the room who can
Mhm.
still be productive. I think Keenan Allen is that guy. So those are the guys I'd look at: Slayton, Allen, Palmer, De'Ami Brown. I loved in college. Hasn't done much as a pro. He had a stellar performance in the postseason, but he's still, and that's why you could probably get him cheap.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't mind him. Those are the receivers I jotted down.
Yeah, Tim Patrick, I definitely agree with, in the connection to Detroit and Denver, I believe, both
Yeah,
teams.
the
So
injury
he's
history is what's scary, though. He missed
that's
2 years
the
due to injury.
that's the huge concern with him. I would hope that if they signed him, he'd likely be your wide receiver 3. That being said, there's not many wide receiver 2 names in the market. I know you said Keenan Allen. That's not a bad name to invoke. I'll go just for the sake of saying another veteran who's a little bit agey, but can still produce at a high level, in my opinion. He's not really the greatest locker room guy from what we've seen. Stephon Diggs. I mean, he's bounced around in the league, and I'm not saying, it's the greatest fit like in the locker room again, but
Depends.
Aaron, if Aaron
If it
Glenn could
if it's a
harness
rookie
him,
quarterback,
right? If you
that
had
would
like a
scare
Justin
me.
Fields with Garrett, Stephon, Tim Patrick, and a tight end in the second round, I feel like that's a solid group with Brees Hall obviously in the backfield. So I'm not advocating for Stephon Diggs, but if you wanted to say a name who's over 30, who could be like a veteran in the room, um, which is kind of funny. I think Darius Slayton. I don't know if you said his name. I would take
I
him
did.
too. I'm cool
Yeah.
with him. Josh Palmer from the
I think
Chargers. I think.
Slayton will be a little. I think Spot Rack had him estimated at 15 mil per year.
See, that's wide receiver 3 for wide receiver 2 money, but I mean, unfortunately, that's kind of the landscape of the league.
Right.
And I'm not advocating to overpay players, obviously, but Diami Brown is a cool one because he's 25. He's only 6 foot, 195 though. So how many sub 6 foot wide receivers can you actually have with
Right.
Garrett and Corley already on the smaller side? But I do think if you don't believe in Corley or you actually want to see him prove it, you go get who was the first guy we talked about? Tim Patrick, Diami Brown, and then Malachi is your fourth. I think that's cool too. So Diami Brown would probably be the most intriguing name because he's 25 and he plays more of a slot, which technically we have, but maybe we don't have. So I'm kind of with you on most of those names there. But I gave a different veteran than Keenan Allen, although I would advise for Keenan Allen before Stephon Diggs.
All right. Tight end. Only 3 names that I liked.
Mm-hmm.
As guys who could be significant contributors or key players. One guy who was just let go, Evan Ingram, let go by the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Mm-hmm.
Again, these aren't superstar players, folks, but the list of Jets tight ends at the moment, you could argue, is nobody, even with Ruckert on the roster. Ruckert has done nothing. And
Yep.
I think he's better than his production. Jesus, I hope he's better than his production. I think you could argue Ruckert has been held back by bad coaching, but maybe not. We don't know. All we know is he's been in the league a few years and he hasn't done anything yet.
Mm-hmm.
So right now you have nothing at tight end that you can count on. So Evan Ingram, just about any free agent is an upgrade. But Evan Ingram would be an upgrade. Juwan Johnson, who I liked. I'd actually started doing this list earlier in the day. The offensive side. I did the defensive side the other day, and Samini mentioned him as a guy. I mean, it's listen, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to put his name on a list because the market is thin, and
Yeah.
he's one of the few sort of up and coming guys who's got some room to improve. The other guy went with again, not a superstar, but Austin Hooper.
Yeah, Ingram has to be the name because he was released and how productive he's been over his career. Tyler Conklin, excuse me, is the second name on the unrestricted free agent cheat sheet that Mike Clay just put out, and I'm not sure how he ranks these guys, but it looks like it's more in terms of their pay. So Ingram is 1, Conklin is 2. We're probably not getting Conklin back. Juwan Johnson, I'd be cool with. I agree, he's a good pass catcher, not much as a blocker. And then if I'm scrolling down, just looking at more blocking type tight ends, you see like the Ross Dwellys, Eric Sauberts of the world, like even Kenny Yeboah down there. Like I'm okay getting one of these guys in free agency and then attacking the tight end position more in the draft where you can get guys with upside. But if you're going to get one guy from this group, I'd say probably Mo Alley Cox would probably be the name I would pick because I think he can do a little bit of each, blocking and passing, pass catching well enough to be like a tight end too. And then you go get a better guy in the draft. So he would be the guy, although I can't disagree with any of the names that you brought up.
Yeah, Mo Alley Cox is a guy I thought he was more productive as a pass catcher than he actually was. I don't know why.
Mm-hmm.
I thought he had bigger number, but I feel like he's a solid blocker, not great, but good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good all around guy.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't mind him at all. Let's see. Dude, the offensive line market is bad.
It's bad.
That's why Samini said he thinks that, and he said, tip your cap. That's why the Bears made 2 trades this week.
Yeah, for
Bears looked at
the
the market and said, we need to get better, and there's nobody out there. And they made a couple of trades. So good
yeah,
job by them.
they were getting mock Tyler Booker at like pick 9 or 10, and I'm like, wow. I mean, like you understand it with their needs and whatnot, but you got to hope that changes after free agency, and they didn't. They clearly couldn't do it in free agency, so they had to get ahead of the market and start trading like crazy.
Yeah, we don't have a ton of time, so I'll just say Morgan Moses.
Yeah, you have to.
Clean bill of health. If
Yep.
you can get him back, looking at this market, get him back.
Yep.
And kind of take the pressure off to, like, Samini mentioned the possibility of Membo at 7. I know that's become sort of a popular thing since the combine.
Yeah.
Guy's a stud. I would have no problem with that pick. But if you get Moses, maybe you're not under as much pressure to get a Membo, and you can draft Tedero McMillan, and we'll all be happy.
Yeah, exactly. Fit Glenn's narrative perfectly. It's how it works. It's not you didn't do it.
I just want what's best for the team.
You didn't do it. Everything just fell into place perfectly like that. Exactly. I agree.
Yeah.
The name I'll invoke at offensive tackle is Jedrick Wills, which is funny because like we're talking about Justin Fields replacing Aaron Rodgers, who replaced Zach Wilson, which is like fixing your mistake of the 2021 draft. Well, here's your chance to kind of fix the 2020 mistake, even though Mekhi Becton is playing a lot better than Wills is currently.
I was going to say Becton is still the better player.
Yeah, at the time, Wills was probably the better prospect. And I'm not saying he would be great for you, but if you can't re-sign Morgan Moses, go try to get the 26-year-old who has upside and pair him with a pick in the top 2 rounds. Like you said, a Membu or, Ursary, who we drafted, mocked to them last week at 42. So somebody like that wouldn't be bad either, but please just go get Moses back. Like he wants to be back. He said it.
Yeah. My info says, how about a receiver at 7? That's, the joke I just made. I've been saying for a while now, Tedero McMillan's been one of my top 2 or 3 options at 7. I think it's a possibility. Again, it's going to depend on what they do in free agency. If they address tackle, that it is possible. But as I said a few weeks ago, or as I quoted Rick Spielman, as Gary says in here, adding Warren gives you an extra lineman. It was Spielman on his podcast who said he believes he's a top 10 pick. So that's worth noting. He's going to be a prominent voice in that room, and that's a guy who fills a need, and you have someone in there who how he feels, and he believes he's worthy of top 10 consideration. Moving over to the defensive side of the ball. Let's see. Another guy, speaking of whether or not it's worth spending big money on some of these players. What about the Dolphin safety? What about Holland?
So I want safeties, and I'm cool with taking them at pick 42 or, signing the best guys, whether it's him or Justin Reed. I don't know exactly what his market's going to command, but yeah, I'd be cool with Javon Holland. I think he's like the free safety rangy guy that we need. I mean, we have nobody, so we need somebody, but I do think he would be one of the best guys that I would bring to the table as far as an addition. Again, I guess it would depend on what the price is, but I'm cool with it.
Yeah, I mean, you got to get some help there, and that's a player who's had a lot of success. So I say make a run at him. Jotted down some names of guys who have played for Aaron Glenn or in Denver with Mugi or Muji. Marcus Davenport, the edge rusher, the end edge, who played for the Lions. I think he's going to be he'll be a rotational piece somewhere and he won't cost you a ton. John Kaminsky, the DT who played for Aaron Glenn with the Lions, and then DJ Jones, I think, who was in Denver. He's a guy who fills with the Jets need. I think he's probably a better run stopper than a lot of the names you're seeing out there, and the Jets really could use that. Even as we've discussed, this is a draft class where there will be tons of DTs available. I still think this team is in a bad enough situation at that spot where you could afford to add a veteran or two and draft a couple guys.
Yeah, this is the year to need defensive line help, whether it's free agency or draft, because you can bring up so many names. Like even Sebastian Joseph Day is kind of buried on the list of interior defensive linemen. Puna Ford, I don't think you mentioned. Milton Williams is like the number one free agent, and he'll probably get
Yeah,
the biggest money.
yeah.
I'm still cool with it. Like I know the Jets they have limited space, but Milton Williams is a complete game changer. We saw that in the Super Bowl, obviously. I would prefer a B tier guy and then hit the draft harder to go find your guy. But go get like a Sheldon Rankins back. I know Levi Wanzarike is the hot name to invoke because he has the
The
Detroit
Detroit.
background,
Yep.
excuse me. Yeah. And but Sheldon Rankins, man, I mean, he had so much success in our defense, and I know it's changing, but it's still going to be an attacking front, probably just with more blitzing and man-to-man coverage on the back end. But you're still going to have violent attacking defensive front with Aaron Glenn and Steve Wilkes. On the edge, I know Josh Sweat is the big name. I don't think that's possible for the Jets. Joey Bosa is probably going to go play with his brother. Zadarius Smith is interesting because he's kind of been bounced around now since leaving Green Bay in 2021, but he did play with the Lions last year and went on a run. So who knows about that? I would stay away from Hassan Reddick. Von Miller's probably not coming. Demarcus Lawrence, I see Derek Barnett, but these are like aging guys. So Azeez Ojulari would be a cool one just because I liked him in the draft process, and I feel like he's just like a situational pass rusher. But we have that in Will McDonald, so it's gonna be like, do you go get a bigger like edge setting D end edge player, or do you want like the skinny, bendy, twitchy guy who's gonna go get you a bunch of sacks? So there's a bunch of names to invoke. I know Brandon Graham's retiring. Chase Young might even be an intriguing one.
Hmm.
He's pretty far down on the list. Tremont Jones used to be on the Broncos, so he's one. I know you said DJ Jones. So yeah, I think you can load up and pay a bunch of B or C tier guys in free agency and then hit the draft and draft one at each position and still be fine.
Real quick at safety, I think another name worth keeping an eye on. Now, look, I don't know how much he has left in the tank. He's been around for a little while, but Von Bell, the
Oh yeah.
longtime Saint safety who played for 3 years under Aaron Glenn when Aaron Glenn was on that staff. So the familiarity with the coach, with the scheme, and being a need for the Jets, I think he is a name to keep an eye on. He's a 9-year veteran, I believe. So
Yeah.
I don't know how many good years he's got left in him, but he's worth considering. Carlton Davis, we talked about. Talking about how Steve Wilkes, Aaron Glenn, they do love to blitz. They're going to need man corners. I think one guy, Rich Eisen, did. He did his 5 things he heard at the combine.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened to that the other day, and he said that one thing he's hearing is the Dallas Cowboys. After the well documented "we're all in" thing last year. Eisen said that what he was hearing from several people in Indy is that the Cowboys are all out on their own free agents, and they will not be bringing many of them back. Maybe one or two. The rest will be allowed to go. So I think cornerback Jordan Lewis, I know from what I've heard of him since entering the league, has done a really nice job as a man cover corner. I loved him out of college. He was my favorite corner that year. Kind of took a little while to break in with Dallas, but once he got on the field, again, I haven't watched him a ton as a pro, but everything I've read about him, I see a lot of people saying, or at least when I was following a little bit closer, the sort of universally, everyone was like, "Why isn't he playing more? Why isn't he playing more?"
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of what people were asking, and so if he's going to hit the market and the Jets need a man cover corner, he's the guy that I would look at. Again, Carlton Davis, I don't know if you want to get in that bidding war. I certainly don't. But look, there are some guys out there. We're throwing out some names of guys we like, some guys we've seen, some guys we've heard other people talk about. But in the end, they're going to sign a bunch of guys that none of us anticipated. There's going to be guys that, are far down, every year. I mean, listen, there's hundreds and hundreds of guys to choose from, and we don't know what the hell their pro personnel department has put together in terms of where they rank these guys. There could be someone we don't like at all who they're high on. There could be someone we love who they think is garbage. But we'll find out in the next, hell. I mean, news is already rolling in of signings. I don't know. It's weird. I understand why the league, why they do what they do. They want to stay relevant and want to always have something coming up. But it feels like free agency should be like the day after the Super Bowl because teams,
immediately start tampering.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That was a point that Samini made in his pod. Like, these free agent deals normally they start in Indy. That's when agents and hey, how much is your guy looking for? And he said by the time the tampering period starts, a lot of these deals are 60-70% wrapped up. It's just a matter of working out the final details. But it's a weird thing. I don't blame anyone for it. It's whatever. You're leaving the team you're with. Who cares if you talk to teams that you're going to go to?
Of course. One more name I want to invoke before we wrap it up, and I know you're a fan of his. I don't know if you still are, but Cam Bynum, the safety from Minnesota.
Oh, how did I leave him out? I didn't put him on my list. He's literally the first guy I was going to talk about on defense.
That's so funny.
Yeah, love them coming out. The end. Yeah, love them coming out. I feel like he's been a good pro. I actually mentioned him. I can't remember if I think some free agency questions came in on, I often do the play like a Jet mailbags.
Yep.
And I think he was the first guy I mentioned last week when someone had a question about free agents the Jets will target and Cam Bynum. Absolutely. Go get him if he's out there.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I think he would fit more for what I would like to see the Jets do than Javon Holland because I think he'll be a cheaper price tag. And I also think you can, use his skill set as like kind of more of a versatile player and build around it in the safety room that way. But either way, I think they're going to prioritize safety a hell of a lot more than Solomon and Douglas did. But I'll let you wrap on that one.
Yeah, look, I think two spots where the Jets, and it seems not just Doug, it feels like for the past, I don't know, way too long, DT and safety are often just like patchwork every year. Like, oh, well, ever since the Jamal and Marcus May thing blew up in their faces, it's been like, let's just sign a bunch of guys to 1 and 2 year deals, draft guys that don't work out. Ashton Davis didn't work out. He had a couple of good moments 2 years ago, didn't do a whole lot this year. He's right, let me take that back. Was it this year? See, I've already wiped this year from my memory. What was it this year? He had a bunch of forced fumbles, or was it the previous year?
I think it was the previous year.
I feel like it was the previous year. It seemed like every time he got on the field, he was punching a ball out or making a play. Didn't see much of that from him this year. So will he be back? I don't know. And I would love to know, and we'll find out, right? Like Aaron Glenn, the whole defensive staff at this point, I'm sure they've had a chance to sit down and watch everybody. I'd love to know if they think, because this is my thought last year, in looking at, and we haven't even touched on the fact, Dylan. I know we only have a second left, but talking about what they're going to spend, Sauce and Garrett are due soon. So we can say they got $53 million, but they can be looking at it like, we got like.
We got to save that for next year.
Yeah, we need that money next year, unless we're trading some of these guys for picks. So we'll see what happens there. But I think the fact that they have some huge contracts coming up could impact what they're able to do in free agency. So we'll see. We'll see. It all kicks off, and like I said, under 24 hours. News has been rolling in over the past few hours already, and I'm sure there is a lot more to come. Thanks everyone for jumping in the chat, for throwing in your comments, questions on players, and what the Jets could do, should do, will do. And we'll know soon enough. I think I'm supposed to work. I think I'm going to take a couple days off of work to cover free agency. I completely forgot I should have the next few days off to discuss that. But that'll wrap this one up. Have a good one, Jets fans. Happy free agency.